Senator Brannigan and Representative Perry and members of the Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Dr. Dora Mills, and I serve as the Director of the Maine CDC within the Department of Health and Human Services. I am here testifying in opposition to LD 1706. I'm also very appreciative that so many experts and people from around the country on both sides have come here today, and it's been a learning experience the last few weeks in studying this issue as well as hearing from them here today. I'd also like to introduce three people have helped me a lot with this testimony. One is Dr. Molly Schwein. If you want to raise your hand, she's an oncologist who heads up our cancer registry here in Maine at the Maine CDC, and Jay Hyland, who heads up our radiation program at Maine CDC. Also, Dr. Andy Smith, our state toxicologist, helped me quite a bit, and he's out of state today. We spent quite a bit of time together, the four of us, reading a lot of the research and also reading the opinions of our federal sister agencies who spend quite a bit of time and have a lot more resources to either do some of the research or study it themselves. So in the testimony and appendices, you will see some of the links to the federal websites that we also have relied on. The US CDC, the National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute, the US FDA, which actually regulates cell phones, and then the Federal Communications Commission. Also the United Kingdom's Department of Health, Health Canada, the World Health Organization, and others are also linked to or quoted in the, especially the appendices. All of these, well, the first reason why we're opposing this is all of these organizations and our own reading of the studies do not indicate a defined brain cancer or other cancer risk that can be warned against, which I might remind you, this bill proposes to put a warning label on all cell phone packagings about brain cancer or cancer risk. And second of all, we also believe that the precautionary principle is already being applied, but we do believe the situation warrants continued monitoring. So to clarify the two reasons. First, to warn against something, there should be a defined risk. Our reading of the research, including numerous studies and analyses, do not indicate there is a defined cancer risk to warn against. And again, that's, if you look in the testimony, there's quite a bit of quotations from the National Cancer Institute and others, and excerpts, for instance, from NCI include results from the majority of these studies have found no association between handheld cellular telephone use and the risk of brain cancer. And also, if you look at the data of brain cancer in the country, there has been no increase in different forms of brain cancer between 1987 and the latest year for that. We also checked in other countries' conclusions as well as the World Health Organization. Again, you'll find a number of those conclusions or links to them in the appendices of our testimony. I might bring your attention to a brochure by the United Kingdom's Department of Health that they have issued. And the focus on this is, I think, a comprehensive look at cell phone use and health. And the focus of this brochure is really on the distractibility issue, where there is less uncertainty about the fact that cell phones, when you're driving or riding a bicycle, can distract you. They also state here that the current balance of evidence does not show health problems caused by using mobile phones. There are significant gaps, though, in the scientific knowledge, and so they do talk about that with children, and that if parents want to avoid their children being subject to any possible risk that might be identified in the future, then they can exercise their choice not to let their children use mobile phones. So that is very similar to what the FDA has on their website, and it really shows that parents can make that choice, but it doesn't propose putting a big warning sign on all cell phones. This also, you might see in the first thing in the appendix is a graph of brain cancer rates in Maine as well as in the country, and that has also been flat over the last quite a few years. At this point in time, we believe the preponderance of evidence does not suggest a defined brain cancer or other cancer risks associated with use of cell phones. However, there is uncertainty, especially regarding the long-term health effects of cell phones. And although there are some uncertainties, there are challenges to issuing striking warnings every time there is an ill-defined risk or some uncertainty. The result can be an overwarned and turned off public. We could have warnings on everything from apples to xylophones if we take every piece of uncertainty and decide to warn against it. Our second main reason is because we believe the precautionary principle is already being applied, and there's written testimony on that. I'm running out of time.
No, that's the cell phone.
But I just mentioned that the precautionary principle, which has been quoted quite a bit, is really not so much about risk communication, it's about taking action to reduce the uncertainty in any science. And in this case, I believe that our federal agencies, as well as governments from around the rest of the world, have done that in terms of supporting research to narrow those gaps in research, as well as designing cell phones to reduce the radio frequency exposure, and also providing the users of cell phones with information on how they can further reduce that exposure. And just in conclusion here, we recognize that there's going to be nearly always some uncertainty when you're trying to prove a negative health risk. There are certain uncertainties here, as people have mentioned. Cell phones haven't been around for decades and decades. You'll see a number of studies, the Danish studies quoted. We've gone through a lot of those studies. We will be available for the work session. We'd be glad to go over those studies with you. In Scandinavia, they've had cell phones since the mid to late 1980s, and they have very mature cancer registries. So that's one reason why you see a lot of studies from Scandinavia. But we also recognize, and as a parent of children, I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, the decision about cell phone use is a very complicated one. I think about those 4 snowboarders the night before last who spent the night on Sugarloaf Mountain. Thank goodness they had cell phones with them. And you might have noticed with the press reports, they were texting. Most children I know of, most kids who have cell phones text. They're not even holding them up to the heads anymore. My own children do not own cell phones right now, but it's not because of the radiation concern, it's because I don't want them distracted when they're walking across the street. I don't want them distracted when they're riding a bicycle, and I don't have a major security concern, a safety concern, other kind of safety concern. They have friends whose parents have. They have friends who are latchkey kids who don't have a landline. For safety issues, they feel their children need a cell phone. There are many factors that must go into this for decisions for parents to make these days. And I think there is not sufficient evidence to place a big warning that takes up a third of the packaging of cell phones saying there's a big brain cancer, potentially brain cancer or cancer risk. I'd be glad again to answer any questions here or at the work session. Thank you very much for your time.
In case people wonder why she got extra time, she's a Mills.
Now, Senator Brannigan.
I think we always used to say as Maine goes rather than as goes Maine.
Yeah, exactly.
Am I right?
Maine goes, so goes the nation.
Questions of the Director, Commissioner? Thank you very much, and we will expect you here for
We'll be here on next Tuesday. Thank you.
the next